Mr. Hoy.
Good morning.
My name is Christopher Grant, and I'd just like to talk to you about 4 different dates. Now, the first date I'd like to talk about is April the 12th. Now, on April the 12th, Avery Bancroft emailed you.
That's correct.
Ms. Bancroft wanted to discuss security precautions for the April 13th meeting.
That is correct.
The meeting she was going to have between herself, Mr. Keenan, and Mr. Covington, correct?
That is correct.
Now, you met with Avery Bancroft that same day.
That is correct.
It was at that meeting that the security for the April 13th meeting was laid out.
That is correct.
But Chase Covington wasn't at that meeting.
That is correct.
Chase Covington, well, he didn't arrange the security for the April 13th meeting.
That's correct.
So I'd like to talk about April 13th now. Now, you worked security for that meeting, correct?
I did.
You stood outside the door.
Absolutely.
And while you were standing outside the door, Chase Covington walked in to proceed in the meeting, correct?
Yes.
He was carrying a black briefcase with him.
Was.
Now, you don't actually know what happened inside that meeting.
That's correct. I was outside.
So you can't tell us anything about what was discussed in that April 13th meeting at all.
I cannot because they made sure that that we checked for any cell phones. There were any cell phones allowed, and I made sure to check the bellhop for a wiretap.
That's not what I asked you, Mr. Hoy. I asked you, you can't tell us anything about what was discussed inside that meeting.
Actually, I did say that is correct, and then I explained why.
Okay, Mr. Hoy, let's move on to April 15th. Now, you said that Ms. Bancroft came to see you in your office that day, correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Bancroft asked about blind spots in the VIP room, correct?
Yes.
You showed Ms. Bancroft where those blind spots were.
I didn't.
But to be clear for the members of the jury, Chase Covington didn't come with Ms. Bancroft.
This is true.
Objection. Relevance 403.
Relevance or character evidence?
Relevance.
So 401? Is that what we're going with? Just relevance?
Yes.
Okay, response to relevance.
Your Honor, may I start with relevance is a very low bar to start off with, and this is very relevant to today's case, as the prosecution is trying to prove that Chase Covington accepted a bribe from Avery Bancroft, so they're using the testimony of Mr. Hoy to say that Chase Covington was aware that the spot he was sitting in was a blind spot when he went to meet with Ms. Bancroft. My line of questioning for this witness is showing that Chase Covington had no idea that where he was sitting was a blind spot. Chase Covington had no idea about the arrangements for security of the meeting. This was all Avery Bancroft's doing, and none of Chase Covington's.
Do you have any response to that?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, overrule. You may continue.
Now, to get back to what I was saying, on April 15th, Ms. Bancroft asked you about blind spots in the VIP room.
This is correct.
But Chase Covington, he wasn't at that meeting.
He was not.
Chase Covington, he never asked you about blind spots.
Correct.
You've never told Chase Covington about any blind spots in the casino.
That's correct.
Now, let's move on to talking about April 16th, Mr. Hoy.
Okay.
Now, you were working that day, correct?
I was.
You were monitoring the camera feeds.
I do that most days, yes.
You saw the camera feeds in the VIP room in particular.
That's part of my job, yes.
Now, on April 16th, you saw Ms. Bancroft and Mr. Covington playing at the center table in the VIP room.
That is correct.
Now, you monitored them only over the camera feeds, correct?
Yep.
You never actually went up to them and saw them in person.
This is true.
Now, while you were monitoring those camera feeds, you never saw them switch briefcases.
Correct, because their briefcases were right where the blind spot was.
But, to bring you back to my question, you never saw them switch briefcases.
I said correct.
And also, none of your staff that was on the casino floor that day reported to you about a switch being made, correct?
Correct, they didn't because it was in a blind spot.
Well, your staff is physically on the casino floor, correct?
Most of the time, yes.
And they didn't report anything to you.
They did not.
Now, Mr. Hoy, you also said on direct examination that that briefcase was the one that Avery Bancroft had, correct?
That is correct.
Is that your testimony in today's court that you can tell the difference between Avery Bancroft's briefcase and Chase Covington's briefcase?
Most of the time I can, but they're so similar that, yes,
So can you tell the difference between that briefcase, Mr. Hoy?
I can.
jurisdiction, it's a waste of time, 403.
I'll give him some time.
Let the record reflect I'm approaching opposing counsel.
Okay.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
What did I just hand you?
This is a copy of my own affidavit.
Is that your signature?
Yes.
Now, are you aware that anything relevant to today's case was supposed to be put in that affidavit?
I am aware.
Now, are you aware that any changes or subtractions or additions to anything relevant to today's case was supposed to be put in that affidavit before trial today?
I am aware.
Now, Mr. Hoyt, I'd like you to turn to lines 195.
Well, the lines are covered up. Do you have a page number?
Yes, the last page where your signature is.
Okay. Line what?
195 through 196. I'd like you to read along silently as I read aloud. Exhibit 1 is a briefcase like the one that Bancroft and Covington had at the blackjack table in the VIP room on April 16th. I couldn't tell you whose briefcase it is. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
You may.
Now, once again, Mr. Hoyt, you cannot tell the difference between Avery Bancroft's briefcase and Chase Covington's briefcase.
That is correct, but if I can't tell the difference and you asked if they had this one, then to me, that's the one that they had.
Mr. Hoy, you don't know whether Avery Bancroft left that room with a different briefcase than when she came in.
Now that is correct.
And you don't know whether Chase Covington left that room with a different briefcase than which he came in,
I just
correct?
answered that correct.
Thank you, Mr. Hoy. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Can you redirect?
No, Your Honor.
You